You have reached the Geek Elite. Good luck.
Welcome back to VHS Gems. This is Jessica. I am joined with John.
Hello.
And this is the podcast in which we open up the VHS Gems treasure box and pick out a gemstone of a movie to watch from the time of VHS, non-zipping cables, and Blockbuster, and all that fun 80s and 90s.
I feel like this was also a little peek into my twisted psyche.
This was an interesting one. Because I can't say I hated it. Like, there were definitely elements I liked. Yes, the gem we are talking about today is Return to Oz. This is from 1985, I think. I'm pretty sure that's what I wrote. And it's a not sequel to The Wizard of Oz.
Unofficial. Yeah, it's got a weird, convoluted history behind it. Yeah, and that's why it's kind of hard to pinpoint it. Was it a remake? Was it a reboot? Was it a sequel? Is it a direct sequel? The answer is yes and no.
Yes and no. So, it should be noted that The Wizard of Oz wasn't just a movie. It was actually a book series before it became a movie. And that movie greatly did not follow the book, from what I was understanding. I have not read these books.
Yeah.
And this movie, which was made a significant amount of years later, is based off of two of the books in the series, the second one and the third one. Which I can't
Yes. I believe they were titled Return to Oz and then Ozma of Oz.
Ozma of Oz, yes, that makes sense. I will note, I do know a little bit about Oz lore, I guess, if you call it lore, because I read a young adult series called Dorothy Must Die, in which it's about another girl from Kansas that gets stuck in a tornado up to Oz, and Dorothy has taken over as like an evil dictator.
Wow.
And yeah, so I actually knew like about Ozma and Mumby and a few other things. I kind of like binge read them, so it's really vague in the details. But like that's where I learned that this is a lot more than just The Wizard of Oz. And I do kind of recommend that series. It's definitely a twisted tale kind of thing. Not like my favorite book, but it was fun.
You know, I've always wanted to jump into Wicked, but I just don't know if I can commit to it.
I tried to jump into Wicked. I think I read it too early in my life, because it is not like the musical. It is significantly darker than I was ready for it to be. I feel like now I probably would love the crap out of it, but at the time I was like, I don't want to read anything dark. And that's what I picked up and I went, you know what? I don't need to know about the Wicked Witch's sex life.
Yes. I feel like I do now.
Well, you should give it a try. I got halfway through the first book, I think, and I got really bored and just like, I don't care that she's green and that she can't get away. Other things. I can't remember exactly what turned out. Something did. I'm never gonna finish this. I should try again. The writing was really good. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about Return to Oz, the 1985 Disney movie, which I only knew was Disney because I found it on Disney Plus back when I first got Disney Plus, and I was like, what's this? And you apparently forgot that it was Disney.
I had no idea that it was Disney. I haven't seen this movie in so long that, yeah, when the Disney logo came up at the beginning, I was like, wait, what? And I was like, this was Disney? Really? And, like, nothing about it screams Disney to me. It's really odd.
Disney did a lot of weird stuff in the 80s. A lot of weird stuff.
Yeah, when they were trying to find themselves.
Yeah. Which, the one thing I found interesting in the trivia about this movie is that the ruby slippers do appear in this movie, which that was not from the books. That was actually made for the Wizard of Oz movie. And so Disney had to pay MGM rights in order to use the ruby slippers. But what I found interesting about that was, like, in the 80s, that was at the time when Disney was trying to strike deals with MGM in order to do MGM Studios, and they basically just took the title MGM Studios and gave none of it to MGM. Because basically MGM didn't read the contract very well. Until later they were like, hey, wait a minute. And I just thought it was funny.
You can't trust Disney. Disney is a cutthroat company.
Oh, yeah, well, I can't remember the name of the guy at the time that was the CEO of Disney, but he was very much a businessman. And
it's probably Eisner.
I think it's Eisner. I don't know, I'm really, really, really bad with names, even though I've watched 5 million Disney movies about that time. But, yeah, it was definitely the same guy that was like, I want to buy the rights to Alien so that I can put a crazy, scary alien ride in the middle of Tomorrowland. It was that guy. Awesome ride. I think I've mentioned that before.
At least once or twice, yeah. It sounds familiar.
It's bitter. I'm really sad they actually don't have that ride. It made 0 sense, but I am really sad that that ride is no longer alive in Disney Park. Maybe with the expansion that was just announced this week, maybe we'll get it again. No, it's not gonna happen. Anyways, back to Return to Oz. This stars a young Dorothy, which is significantly younger than the Dorothy in Wizard of Oz, which is probably the first thing I noticed, was like, why is she like 10? She was like 16 in the first movie. Which is very well, oh, it's based off the books. And that was played by, I don't know her name, I'm sure you hopefully know her name, but she is somebody that I recognized in other roles when she was an adult.
Yeah, so she's played by Fairuza Balk.
Okay.
And she is most famous for being the head witch in The Craft.
Yes. I actually recognized her, though, from...
The Water Boy?
No, not Waterboy. Oh, no, I forgot she was in that. American History X. And
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Almost Famous, which Almost Famous is one of my favorite movies about music that's not a musical.
So basically... Yeah, the movies where she's like a background character.
Yeah, basically. But she has like that, I don't know, and I think I have watched, I watched her lead in, but like, she just has one of those faces that you recognize. Like, even when she was a kid, I recognized her face. I was like, oh, her face looks so familiar, and she just has very prolific style to her.
And she's been working pretty non-stop. Like, she's got all kinds of credits in her IMDb page. She was even in the Justice League TV show as Penny D, which I'm not sure who that character is. Doesn't sound familiar. Just done video game work. Like voiceover stuff. Island of Dr. Moreau. Oh, interesting. So apparently they did a sequel to The Craft, and she reprises her role.
That's
25 odd years later.
Ah.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
I need to watch The Craft. I have never watched it.
I mean, it was in the time of VHS. That would definitely fit right in there.
We do need to do some horror stuff, so I'll add it. But
absolutely. Ooh, there should be like a whole theme of witches, because Teen Witch also needs to be in there.
Okay. Alrighty then. Watch that one. I think there was the lady who played Mombi was also in Willow.
That would make sense.
I can't remember her name. Some really bad with names.
Jean. That was Jean Marsh.
Yeah. Which we had somebody from Flash Gordon last week was also in Willow, right?
I believe so. And as a matter of fact, somebody from Flash Gordon is in this one also.
What?
You'll never guess who.
It's one of the Wheelers.
Nope.
Darn. Tin Man? TikTok?
Yes. No, not TikTok. Although TikTok, one of the performers, I don't know if it was a puppeteer or the voice, but one of the persons that was in charge of bringing TikTok to life also did Admiral Akbar in Return of the Jedi.
Oh, yes, that would be the puppeteer. I did see that one, which apparently the puppeteer is also a gymnast, because I remember reading somewhere that he walked in the TikTok thing on his hands with legs bent for the arms.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
So in back in the day, when this movie first came out, and I was a wee lad of about 5 years old, I would watch Nickelodeon a lot because they had kids programming and cartoons, and they would sometimes have like these little specials where they would talk about like current movies. I remember they did one on Little Shop of Horrors, which came out also like around that time. And they did one entire episode, I forget what it was called, but it was like a kids' news show. And they talked about Return to Oz. And they showed you a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. And they asked, like, the audience, they're like, hey, how do you think they made TikTok come to life? And they showed, like, the scenes in the movies where he's walking and stuff. And, like, you might be thinking it's a puppet, right? And I was like, yeah, that's probably a puppet. Because you look at how the legs are spaced apart, and you look at how it's moving, and you're like, nah, this thing's being controlled, like, with strings or sticks or something, you know? And then they show you, like, behind-the-scenes footage, and the thing came apart in the middle. So TikTok is basically shaped like a big, like, kind of like a, I don't know, like a boiler or something, like some kind of a...
Yeah, that's what he reminded me of, an old boiler, a big round body.
Or like a furnace of some kind, like a stovetop thing. So, yeah, that thing opened in the middle, and the performer would actually be bent over, and he would actually be basically walking up backwards. So, like, his ass was pointed towards, like, the front where the face is of TikTok. And he had a little monitor that he could see to like, look out where he was going. And he would walk, like, hunched over, bent over, almost completely in half, with his arms and legs to control the legs of the TikTok character. And I was like, how does anybody do that for like more than a minute without just cramping over? Apparently he was a gymnast. But man, like if you get a chance to just watch like a quick behind the scenes video of how this person did it, like holy shit, that's dedication to your craft.
Yeah, I guess. I wonder how much he paid.
Probably scale, because you know he's doesn't have any FaceTime on screen. But to answer the previous little trivia of who from Flash Gordon was also in this movie, that was Deep Roy.
Oh.
Deep Roy was, and you'll never guess where he was in the movie because you never see him either, at least not directly.
Oh, Scarecrow?
Close. He was the Tin Man.
Oh, the Tin Man. That you saw for like 5 seconds.
Yeah, and he was probably like inside like the chest piece of it, controlling it from the inside, because I mean that's also like very much a puppet looking thing, but yeah, like apparently he was inside moving like the arms or something.
Oh yeah. So before we get into the plot, I would like to say one of my favorite things that I researched, because I actually did research just a little bit this time. The director was Walter Murch. He's more known for sound, I noticed. In fact, he did the sound of Apocalypse Now, which is probably like one of the best sound movies ever. Like I remember after I watched it the first time, hearing the helicopter in the beginning, it's just beautiful sound cinematography. And also it's like just one of those movies that you learn about in film studies. for being good for its sound, among other things. Love its sound, great movie. But this was the only movie he had directed, except for he had one other director role, and that was for a Star Wars Clone Wars episode in 2011 called The General, which I had to look up that episode, but it's actually one of my favorite Clone Wars episodes that didn't have the Jedi in it, kind of. But it basically was more about the clones dealing with this Jedi general that was basically trying to kill them by basically putting them on suicide missions, in a way, and the clone Rex having to deal with having to follow orders, and because you must follow orders in general, but also knowing that those orders are wrong. So that's why it was one of my favorite. I mean, I think this was just one episode of 3 that was like a really good arc within the story that just makes the Clone Wars show just so utterly awesome. But yeah, he did that.
Makes sense. He also has a tangential connection to George Lucas, because apparently he also did sound for THX 1138 and American Graffiti, among other really famous movies. So yeah, this guy knows what he's doing when it comes to sound and ambience. Directing, I don't know. What do you think about his directing job on this one?
I don't know. It's really hard for me to judge 80s children movies and their direction, because were they really supposed to be directed very well? They were just popping them out left and right.
Now, I'm wondering if this was supposed to be a horror movie, because, I mean, right off the bat, you have...
It's crazy, which, to me, like, I feel like Oz in general is a horror story. Like, to me, I used to joke all the time, I think on Geeks Watch More, that it should be Fae that are evil. Like, Oz is very much, they're Fae. Like, they're that concept of, they trick you, and don't ever bargain with them, and they only speak in riddles, and just also, like, don't touch the stand because it'll kill you. Like, that's definitely, like, elements of, like, Fae and, like, lore style Fae and fairy and stuff. And so, it's a really dark concept. So I actually liked how dark this movie was. I'm like, yes, no, this makes sense for Oz, for it to be dark. Like,
well, yeah, when you get to the fantasy part and things are dark, that's one thing, but we start the movie with Auntie M thinking that Dorothy's gone crazy and takes her to an insane asylum to get electroshock therapy.
Which, at the time, was very, very, very horrible. They still do electroshock therapy now. It's called something else. I can't quite remember what it's called.
It's like electroconvulsive therapy?
Yes, there you go, electroconvulsive therapy. And it actually does work for a few things. I think one of the biggest thing it actually works for is severe depression. So, but it had really, really bad origins.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of, it was like one of those things where they're like, hey, this is a new technology, let's just see what we can do with it. And which is honestly how science kind of sort of works, but like, now we're just a bit more ethical about it. I mean, the way it's presented, it was like the electrical equivalent of snake oil. I mean, they were like, yeah, this new technology that we have now, all kinds of things are...
I mean, cocaine's kind of the same way, same thing, morphine, heroin actually first came out as a way for people to get over morphine addiction. Because they just literally thought, well, maybe if we make morphine more pure, then they'll get over their morphine addiction. And it ended up being...
I mean, right?
But, I mean,
I feel like it, yeah.
Maybe this will work. And let's not even begin about lobotomy. Like, I mean, clearly it works, because, you know, her brain's not working anymore. But... I'm going back to my psychology days in college, just learning the history of it, and it's like, oh, so many bad things.
So, what was a treatment for hysteria that they might have had back in the late 1800s?
Late 1800s? Ooh. Honestly, hysteria probably would just be going into an insane asylum. Because I think hysteria was also more of just for women thing. I don't think men typically got hysteria. Well, later on in the 90s, hysteria would have definitely been lobotomy.
Oh, wow.
Which I try to remember when the first lobotomy was done. Probably. But yeah,
I want to say it was
if
also...
you were wild, they were like, just just cut off a bit of her brain. Like, it's fine. Or there. It did happen to Ben, too. But I think it happened. I wonder if it happened. Oh. We should not delve deep into unethical studies. So, yeah, we continue. So, Dorothy goes and gets left in some city to get electroshock therapy because she's not sleeping well, and she's actively talking about Oz, to which I was always just like, Dorothy, just shut up. Just stop talking about it and pretend your eyes are closed when your aunt comes checks on you. Like, come on, Dorothy, think about it. You were smart enough to, like, get back home and to beat the Wicked Witch of the West. You're not smart enough to, like, lie to your aunt. But okay. And we get introduced to this nurse, which I can't remember quite what her name was, but she's evil just because of the outfit she's wearing.
Yeah, Nurse Wilson. I mean, she already looks like she's straight out of Oz with this large black, like massively like shoulder padded outfit.
Yes, and that nice tight corset. It was actually a really cool looking outfit, but it just...
Not what you want to see a nurse wearing, though.
No, not what you want to see a nurse wearing. And when Dorothy goes to get shocked, there's an electrical storm, and the light cuts out. Oh, we skipped. Before that, before Dorothy goes on her appointment, she's feeding the chickens or something, or looking for eggs, and one of the chickens finds a key, which had a circle and a line through it, and Dorothy went, it's an Oz key, because I wouldn't have figured that out. I would have been like, it's just a key with a line through it.
And she saw a shooting star the night before, and like she assumes, oh, somebody must have sent it to me from Oz.
Naturally, and she goes and talks to Auntie Em, and Auntie Em's, yep, we're gonna go shock you, I guess.
Yeah, we'll shock the crazy out of you.
Yes, because now in this version, it's not like Wizard of Oz in the movie where they basically imply that Dorothy's whole trip to Oz was just a dream, and she does that moment where she's like, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there. No, in the actual book, Oz is an actual place. It's not a dream that Dorothy is in. It's a real place. And they kind of sort of, I feel like I saw in the trivia for this one was they cut out the scene in which they show a newspaper clipping that Dorothy was actually missing for days after the tornado, and then she was found. So.
Yeah, they play with the timeline here, because we have something kind of sort of similar with what happens to her in this one.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so as she's about to get electroshocked, another, I guess, patient at the facility, this insane asylum kind of situation, basically says, we got to get you out of here, and they both plan a little, like, daring escape. And as they're...
So well.
I mean, it was pretty smart. They knew how to hid, and yeah, so like all the power went out, and electricity is still like a relatively new thing, so they're all kind of just like scrambling around in the dark. They manage to get out, but the nurse sees them and starts chasing them. And all the way into, I guess, like all of a sudden there was a huge wash that formed, or maybe it was a river. I can't tell.
Well, it was a thunderstorm, so it was raining pretty hard, so I assume it was actually a river that was flooding, was what I went through. Like, it was one of those normally just a trickle, and then during rain, it's a crazy flood. Dorothy finds herself getting into a crate, and the girl that had saved her is gone.
Yep, just up and disappears.
Yep. And then, Dorothy pops up in a pond, and her chicken is there.
Yeah, her chicken just appeared out of nowhere. Yeah.
Thinking, how did the chicken get there? That drove me nuts. I was like, where did the chicken come from? Was the crate supposed to be like the crate that because no, her auntie didn't have like a crate with her where she was going to go sell the chicken.
No, I think the logic behind it, I think, is that as she was being washed away, she passed by the farm, and at this point we were no longer dealing with reality, so like in this weird magical way that this thing happened, she got washed through, and the chicken somehow ended up with her, who was what was her name, Mrs. something, Billy, Billing? Something like
Bellina.
Bellina.
Yeah. The chicken's
Yes.
name was Bellina. And she could talk in Oz. So that's why I was like, why is there a chicken there? And then it took me a second to even realize that it was her chicken that had found the key. And like, oh, and her name was Bellina. And they appear in a pond, now in Oz, in the desert area, in which if you touch the sand, you will become sand. Which I was already like, okay, we're gonna be this version of Oz.
Yep.
God.
Apparently, this is closer to the books than the actual movie was. The movie took a lot of liberties and made it much more kiddie. But yeah, the actual version is supposed to be kind of like all the characters are really like messed up psychologically.
Yeah, I could do that. I actually am curious to read the book series now, because I'm like, this is kind of, it's almost like folkloric. I kind of like it. I dig it. But she hops her way on some rocks to the green grassy area of Oz, and those rocks have a face in it. Surprise.
Yeah, and the face changes, and it lets you know that it's actually like a living creature, basically. Yep. And apparently they're very angry that they brought a chicken, or that there's a chicken there. Yes.
He goes to report to this mountain guy, the Gnome King, we find out later on. Basically, that there's a chicken with her. Dorothy's back, and there's a chicken. And I guess the Gnome King is afraid of chickens. And I'm just like, why is he afraid of chickens? You find out at the end. Don't worry, we'll get there.
Yeah.
And then Dorothy finds her way to her old house, which is still there.
That was a nice touch, yeah.
Yeah, she's talking to Bellina what happens, and Bellina is basically like, we need to get out of here. Like, I'm just chicken. This is not okay. And also, the yellow brick road is broken and all crumbled, and Dorothy runs down it. I swore she was going to trip as she was running in those tiny little heeled shoes. Yeah, but she runs. Yeah. Okay.
This was a part that, like, trying to go back and remember what had happened. Somehow in my brain as a kid, I thought that they had explained that in the time that she was gone, it was like years and years in like Oz time, like kind of like how it works in Narnia.
Yeah.
Where like time is different in both places. So yeah, like I thought that was interesting that when she came back, the house was there, but like there were no more munchkins anywhere. The road was all destroyed, the yellow brick road. And then yeah, like they get closer and closer to Oz, or to the Emerald City, and that place is like all destroyed and overrun, and it looks like it's just super dilapidated. But it doesn't sound like. It basically sounds like she's only been gone, like that, like those few months that she had been back, basically.
It was 6 months, according to Anton.
6 months?
She'd been like this for 6 months, not sleeping. So, and that kind of sort of makes sense. Like, from what I got from the young adult books I read, is that which I hope I'm getting this right, because like I said, I read it a long time ago, but from what I understood from those books, the Yellow Brick Road kind of is its own magical being that can shift and change. So if the Gnome King took over the magic with their ruby slippers, and that means the Yellow Brick Road would be destroyed. And then also just Oz is ever-changing and changes fairly quickly as well, because of how the Yellow Brick Road puts everything together too. So it kind of made sense to me. It's like, okay, I could see it, I guess.
Just accept it, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a thing. But yeah, she goes to the Emerald City, which is in ruins. Everybody is statues, and there are wheelers, which are the things that nightmares are made of.
Those guys were cool. I really like those guys.
They were cool, but at first they were really creepy. Like that first initial, I was like, what is that? Like, it was just so disturbing, because they're just humans with wheels for limbs, basically.
Yeah,
and
I'd like to think that they were cursed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I was like, what is this? And she runs away from them with Bellina, and then she ends up in a spot where she can use her key to get into a room, and in that room is TikTok.
Yep, who's been waiting for her since ever since the takeover happened, apparently.
Yes, so and TikTok basically explains that the Gnome King took over Oz, and he turned everybody into stone, and TikTok didn't get turned into stone because he's not technically a living thing. That's what it is. Every living thing got turned into stone. And Scarecrow didn't, and then also TikTok didn't because TikTok's not technically a living thing. And TikTok comes with 3 winders. One was the thinking winder, or thought winder, or something like that. Then the speech one, or language, and then the action one. So you have to wind all 3 in order to talk to him and get him to actually think and be logical. And then also, and you had to constantly wind them up. Which I thought was, like, cool, but definitely a plot device. Because, of course, he's going to run out of his wind at the most inopportune moments.
Yeah, I think it was kind of genius that they said, like, they should have designed you so you could wind yourself.
I thought that line was a bit more genius than just... because that was definitely alluding to, like, other things, like... which my brain on this Friday night that we're recording this is not quite there to explain what it made me think. But it's just... That's definitely, like, an allegory for being, like, I don't know, lower working class or something, like, where you just can't fix yourself. Like, no, if he could, like, wind himself, then he could take over the world, and, like, stuff like that.
But maybe he would be too preoccupied with winding himself that he wouldn't actually do anything else. Yeah,
Maybe.
Think about that.
No. But... No, I definitely think it was more of the, like, you don't want technology to have too much power. You don't want a non-living thing to have too much power either.
Oh yeah, and he liked to remind you... Yeah. He liked to remind you all the time that he was a non-living thing.
Yeah, but Dorothy got really attached to him, so he was alive in her heart. And he was alive to me. TikTok was probably one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, and I mean... I kind of almost thought, because at some point we ran across that potion of living powder or something like that, or wait, not powder of living,
yeah,
that they used to animate that moose head and to turn it into like a flying couch thing. Yeah. I thought they were going to use that on kind of like how they, in the original, like Dorothy was like, oh, I had the power to go home this whole time. I thought when they had that living powder that they were going to put it on him on TikTok and be like, oh, we could have made you alive this whole time. But he kept saying he didn't want to be alive, so he'd probably be mad about it.
No, I thought they were just going to put the living power on the statues of the people. We're like, boom, you're alive.
That too. Like, that's spread it all over town.
Well, maybe they were still, like, statues. They were just living statues. I don't know. We'll never know. That's not what they did. Instead, they made an awful couch thing. But we'll get to that. TikTok goes and he defeats all the wheelers by basically swinging his arms in a giant circle and hitting them with a pail. A lunch pail that hung from a tree. I forgot about that part. It looked like an apple tree, but they were lunch pails, and in the pails were actual lunches, like a ham and cheese sandwich.
I mean, that was pretty cool. I kind of wish that was a real thing.
Yeah. And then the wheelers are basically like, you need to talk to Mombi, which is where I knew. I was like, no, isn't Mombi another wicked witch? But, and apparently Mombi is also considered the princess that can change her heads.
That was a cool gimmick, by the way. I really enjoyed that little trick that she can do.
Yes. I did enjoy that trick that she could do. I liked her Hall of Heads and how they all kind of reacted. I also really liked the whole idea that she doesn't remember things. Like, she only remembers what the head remembers. So if she switches heads, she won't remember what that thing is.
See, that's pretty genius.
Yeah. Of course, though, the head that she chooses for most of the movie is the same head as the nurse that you saw.
Yep, gotta tie it back into the reality. Now, I'm going to take a quick side note here and mention that one of the things I remember the most about this movie, and maybe because I'm also a big fan of Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer.
Yeah.
I think it was in the second movie, Conan the Destroyer. There's a sequence where they go to like that wizard's castle, and he has a hall of mirrors.
Ooh.
And that was a cool fight sequence where he's fighting against himself, basically, or against these monsters that go in and out of the mirrors. And it was just shot really cool. Kind of similar to that mirror scene in Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. Just, mirrors are cool for some reason in cinema, you know? And
Mirrors,
this palace had so many mirrored surfaces. Even the floor looked like it was mirrored. It was so cool. And that's one of the things that sticks out to me the most. It was like, man, that mirrored palace was just so creepy and so awesome. And I liked how everything looked in that whole entire sequence. We don't go to very many locations, I came to realize in this version of rewatching it. But we spent a lot of time here, and I think, it was because it was a cool looking place.
Yeah, it was really cool. The whole palace was really cool. The amount of mirrors was cool. I always find, like, how they film with that many mirrors in the room. Like, I feel like it has to be a pain. Like, I'm really curious how you film in an actual, like, room full of mirrors. Actually, one of my favorite mirror scenes in a film that you didn't mention is probably in Ella Enchanted. I don't know if you've seen that one, but there's a scene that she has where she's basically in an area, like, surrounded by mirrors and, like, a really awesome...
That's the Drew Barrymore Sleeping Beauty one? Or Cinderella one?
No,
Ella Enchanted?
Anne Hathaway is the Cinderella-ish character, but Ella Enchanted actually is also a book based off of the Cinderella tale. But this one is in which the Cinderella character gets kind of sort of cursed by her fairy godmother when she was born to always obey.
Oh,
So,
gotcha.
yeah, anytime anybody tells her, like, you should shut up, she has to shut up, and you should do this. And basically, the mirror scene is where the uncle of the prince tells her that she needs to kill him in this particular room. And she goes to do it, but she manages to not. But because of the mirrors, the prince sees her. So, it's great. But it's just a really cool... It's a really cool room, like mirrors. And there's also, not to mention the amount of like magical elements to mirrors in general, and how there are pathways to the dark world and all that stuff, and demons possess you, and you should never stand in between two mirrors because that opens a gateway into your brain and lets demons sleep in and stuff like that.
It looks like you're playing Portal.
Yeah, it looks like you're playing Portal. And yeah, and that also all goes to the fact that, as mirrors got clearer, they got creepier to us as humans, so we added a bunch of more to them, and that's why if you break a mirror, 7 years of bad luck, because A, they're expensive, and B, there's a creepy demon living inside of it. It's your other self. It's your darker self. It's... Mirror War is very fun. So Mombi decides she's going to lock up Dorothy because she wants her face when Dorothy grows up, and... Dorothy finds Jack, naturally, who is a jack-o'-lantern, pumpkin, scarecrow person.
Yeah, he's
I
like
guess.
an animated pumpkin man.
Yeah.
Pumpkin head.
Yep. Which now explains why there is that scene where she's in the asylum. I don't know, it wasn't an insane asylum, but where she's at the doctor's and she's combing a jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah.
And I was like, why is she combing a jack-o'-lantern? Oh, it's because it's going to be Jack later on. Okay. And Jack basically explains that he had a mother, but mother's gone, and he wants Dorothy to be his mother now. He calls her mom.
Yeah, he's real mama's boy.
Yeah. It's cute. And he's just made of sticks. He's very much like the Scarecrow. Just no hay. And she learns from Jack about this life powder thing, and she decides she's going to go steal it, while TikTok, Jack, and Bellini try to figure out how to make a vessel to leave the castle in. Which...
Yeah. which is some from like a childlike perspective. I'm like, oh, how whimsical that they've thought of like putting these random things together and that made like a flying thing. But the adult in me is like, that's stupid.
That would never.
Yeah.
Those leaves would never be able to lift that couch.
Yeah, like such flimsy rope tying. Like the logical part of me really killed it. And I think it was one of the first moments I was self-aware enough to be like, oh yeah, I'm definitely an adult now, because I don't find these kinds of things like funny or cute anymore. Now I just think about like how impractical it would be.
Yeah, see, and that's where I just went, well, magic is magic, I guess. Who am I to say that that wouldn't fly logically? Because, I mean, I still to this day don't quite understand how planes can fly, but I mean, I do understand how planes can fly. I'm still amazed that they can fly. Like big iron ships. What? How? Oh, I get it, buoyancy, but like at the same time, if it's heavy. But yeah, so
it's because it's all the simulation, man. None of this is real.
She gets the living powder. It's naturally in the box with Mombi's head, one of Mombi's head, and of course Mombi's head wakes up, and all the other heads wake up, and they freak out, and then Mombi's headless body wakes up and chases after Dorothy.
Which is also a cool sequence, by the way, that the chamber of all the heads was like such a nice touch.
Yes. I'd like to know, all the puppetry and stuff was really cool in this movie. Some of them were creepy, but they were really cool. In fact, I actually really liked the effect of the rock face. Like, I thought that looked really cool, how it moved and stuff. Yeah, I'm sure it was motion capture, right? Stop motion capture, I feel like, is what they were using, but it was cool.
Well, kind of. It was a little more primitive than that, but from what I read in the trivia information for this is that they took the head wheeler was the main one that they modeled for the different rock faces, except for King Gnome. And so what they would do is they would film him doing the dialogue, and then they had a stop motion animator basically frame by frame copy in the rock what his face was doing.
That's pretty cool.
So it's kind of like a much more involved version of rotoscoping, where you're like putting you're transferring the performance into that physical medium.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's the result, is that it came out pretty cool looking like that, because up until then, like I hadn't really seen stop motion that was that expressive.
Oh yeah, that was really cool. That's cool. I think that's also where I was like, yeah, this is a Disney movie. Was looking at all the effects of it. I'm like, yeah, no, that makes sense that this would be an 80s Disney movie. They always go over the top with their effects.
I will say, the not the stop motion, the animatronics for Bellina were really good.
Oh yeah.
Because there were some times, there were a few times I thought that was a real chicken.
Yeah, Disney is known for their animatronics too. So I mean, they're still top in the field with animatronics. A few of the stuff they've been making lately is so lifelike that you don't even think it's not real. I've seen a few in person, and I'm just like, how is that not an actual thing? And I'm really excited to see the Spider-Man one that they have that actually like does a flip in the air. Yeah,
that's the one I'm blown away by when I see the test footage of that. I'm like, geez, that's crazy.
Yes, it's gonna look nuts, and it's gonna terrify me, and it's definitely gonna terrify Mitch. So,
you need to get front row seats to that one.
Yeah, but like even their original one, I've seen like great moments with Lincoln, and that's like one of the first animatronics they made. Even that one, seeing that stand up is just like, that's Lincoln. Like that's cool. It's just the coolest thing ever. Anyway, animatronics, Disney, they're really good at this. But yeah, that chicken was good. So they get out on the moose head couch leaf thing, which I think they gave it a name, and I cannot remember the name that they gave it.
Yeah, what was it? They called it a gump, but was that supposed to be the kind of animal it was?
I have no idea. It was like a moose with its antlers kind of sort of shaved off. I think it was gum. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of greenish for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I figured that it's Oz moose, so it's gotta be green. I don't know. But, I felt like he was, like, I think I kept calling him Eeyore or something, because he reminded me of, like, Eeyore, and the fact that like, I don't know how to fly. Oh, well, guess I could fly. I just, like that. So they're flying, they figured out that the Gnome King lives in the mountain, and they want to go talk to him to find the Scarecrow, or do they think the Scarecrow is there? The Scarecrow is there. Anyway, they go to the mountain. They have to fly over the desert. A couple of the wheelers chase after them, and then turn into sand when they touch the desert sand. And then those wheelers go back to Mombi, and Mombi's like, I gotta get my way to the mountain now. Like, the Gnome King doesn't know there's a chicken with Dorothy. Whatever, she races their, I assume, underground pathway that goes below that sand. And naturally, as they're over it, their bindings start to fall apart, and Jack tries to save the day. Jack loses his head. The whole thing falls off, and they all land safely on the mountain somehow. Dorothy literally lands on part of the couch, and Belina...
That cut, by the way, when Dorothy, like, she looks like she fell like a solid 20 feet onto that couch. I was like, what? Like, that was really good, like, edit for that.
Like, it looked like it hurt. Like,
yeah.
Like, ooh, like, she's alive, but, like, ouch, your tailbone is gonna hurt for a bit. Belina... I think I must have missed how Belina ended up in Jack's head.
Well, that was the point that it happened. It was during that sequence, but yeah, at that point, I don't know if we discussed it earlier, but at the very beginning, when Dorothy and Belina show up to Oz again, you hear one of the rock creatures reporting to King Gnome, and he says, like, she brought a chicken.
Yeah.
And he just screams, like, chicken. Apparently,
chickens are pretty brutal. I hear
apparently, yeah, like, they'll definitely gouge your eyes out, but it's still, you know, like, okay, what's this deal with chickens? And yeah, so that turns out that's gonna factor in very, like, importantly, in just a little bit.
Yes. So Dorothy's talking to the rock, and the rock basically tells her, like, no, you can't have, I don't know. They basically, like, have words, and Dorothy is basically like, well, if it's a war you want, it's war you get, and then proceeds to fall down a hole. And she lands and actually gets to talk to the Gnome King, which at this moment the Gnome King basically looks like the rock face, but a bit more pronounced at this point, I would say.
Yeah.
And the Gnome King says, oh, first she fell into Scarecrow's arms, and then Scarecrow disappears, and then she's in the lair with the Gnome King. And she's crying or whatever. Or then Gnome King is like, I turned the Scarecrow into an ornament, basically. And she starts crying, naturally, and the Gnome King's like, oh, there, with his crazy rock hand patting her on the head. He's like, how can I make this better, basically? And she basically, all she wanted was a chance to get the Scarecrow back. And he's like, okay, I'll make a deal with you. I'll make a bargain with you. Basically. Which is just where I'm going, like, don't ever make bargain with Fairy. Like, you can't do that. So no. But she does, and the bargain is she'll let all of her friends go into his little knick-knack room, and they get 3 chances to guess which knick-knack is Scarecrow. And if they fail, then they face consequences. But they, of course, don't ask what those consequences are. Naturally. But they all agree that, yes, we will go ahead and partake in this. We will do our 3 guesses. Whatever. And Gump is the first one that goes to make his guess. The Moosehead couch gets to go make a guess. He's a living thing now, I guess. And while Gump is going, I've really enjoyed the scene of them eating limestone scones and drinking molten silver. How does it taste? Oh, it tastes pretty good. And the mountain's like, yeah, it's limestone. And I'm like, oh, no, that's going to ingest. Okay, Dorothy. Gump fails, and the mountain rumbles, and Dorothy's like, well, what happened? And he was like, well, now he's an ornament, too. Because he failed, he now becomes an ornament, so Dorothy's realizing, oh, she's like, oh, I didn't know that was going to be the consequences. And the guy was like, well, you didn't ask. Are you going to continue or not? And they all choose to continue. Once again. Now that they know their lives are on the line. One thing I noted and I liked is that as they failed, the Gnome King got more human. And I liked this aspect because it wasn't super duper obvious. Like, I think it wasn't, I don't know, nowadays I think movies treat kids like really dumb. Disney doesn't typically do it, but there's like other movies that I think they like really tell as opposed to showing what's going on. Whereas this just was like, he got more living, lifelike as they failed. So clearly he was gaining power from them turning into ornaments in some way. It didn't explain how, didn't explain why, but that's what was happening. And he kind of sort of looked like, by the end, he looked like a stone version of the Ghost of Christmas Present, was what he reminded me of.
Yeah,
basically Santa Claus.
He definitely looked like that, yeah. And he was being played by the electroshock doctor too. It was the same actor that was doing that role.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I forgot that. I should have known and looked more for the real people that were in there. So TikTok is the second to last to go. As he's going, the Gnome King tells Dorothy something's wrong. TikTok just stopped, and she's like, I only wound his thought thing. I didn't wind his action. So he must have run out of action. And the Gnome King's like, look, I like you, girl. So I'll let you go in. He only has one guess left. I'll let you go in, pull his action, and then you can do your guesses. So, and once she gets there, TikTok's like, yeah, my action didn't actually run out. He's like, I was just going to make a guess, hoping that my guess will give you a clue if I fail. He's like, either I win it or I fail, and hopefully that gives you a clue.
And that was pretty smart. I was like, you know, I like how they think. That was actually clever.
TikTok is very, very, very smart, as long as you pull his thinking thing. Winder. So they do that. TikTok fails, but it's kind of sort of obvious that Dorothy did not quite figure out what he turned into. I don't think what he turned into ended up being on the table that he had guessed.
No, you never see it, until later.
Yeah, I absolutely loved this ornament room, though. It was like walking into like an antiques, like a really nice antique store that actually have all the antiques like spread out. You're like, wow, like that looks so neat. Like, are all these replica? Are some of these like real knickknacks from people's collections that were on the movie? Like, that was a cool room.
I wondered that too. I was like, where did they get all this stuff? Like, where is it actually from?
Yeah, although honestly, I've done like Disney's backlog tours back when they had them, and it's just like a collection of props. Like now they are pretty good at collecting their props. In the olden days, they were not good at collecting their props, which is why you have shows on Disney Plus like, what is it called, Prop Culture?
Oh yeah,
like that.
I love that show.
That guy finds old Disney props. Oh yes, that's a great show. But I was like, maybe they did just take these from props from their other movies, or just borrowed them from other movies and other lots and stuff. But it was a really cool room. Dorothy does 2 guesses. She loses. During that time, Mombi gets to the Gnome King and tries to warn him, in which he basically like makes her bow really deep. That's the evil jerk thing, and then I don't know why he gets mad at her, but he gets mad at her and locks her in a cage.
He gets mad at her because Dorothy starts to figure it out.
Oh, yeah, and so he's like, because she berates him for Dorothy figuring it out. She's like, why would you even give her a chance? Like, kind of thing. And Yep, Dorothy decides she's not going to figure it out by just picking one, so naturally she closes her eyes, spins around, and she at first grabs a bird, and then she sees an emerald right next to the bird, and she touches the emerald, and she says Oz, and of course that emerald ended up being Scarecrow. And
Which, really weird, goofy version of Scarecrow, because he didn't have a movable face. It was just like a mask, and it made it look kind of like a horror movie character, like he would be coming after you with a knife.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess it's kind of hard to do a Scarecrow character in a movie because, A, they couldn't do the Wizard of Oz one because they would have to pay even more since they already had the ruby slippers and something else that they had to pay rights for. And then also, like, the villain, the Batman villain Scarecrow, too. You can't have it look too much like that. And then wasn't there another Scarecrow going around at the time? Too? Another horror Scarecrow?
Back
I can't remember.
At that time, I don't remember. I don't think so.
Yeah, but I feel like it'd be hard to make a Scarecrow that didn't look like a Scarecrow that already existed. So they just made this thing, and it looked horrifying.
Yeah, it was like a killer clown from outer space looking like Scarecrow.
Yeah. So the Gnome King gets really upset. And, also, one thing you find out, too, that I totally skipped, is the Gnome King currently has the ruby slippers, because when Dorothy was going back to Kansas, they fell off her feet. And so the Gnome King's like, this is all your fault, ha ha ha. And Dorothy's like,
Apparently those slippers were powerful enough to help him basically, like, subjugate the whole Emerald Kingdom and take away all the jewels that he claimed. Also, we skipped over that part, but he felt really indignant that all of those emeralds technically belonged to him because they were taken from his mountain. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
I would like to know, I do believe it is true that the books are about communism, and the evils of capitalism, if I remember correctly.
you know, I wasn't going to bring it up because I know that I'm all burnt out on my conspiracy stuff, but yes, there's a really great documentary called the Road to Oz or something like that. And it talks about how the first book, at least, is all about not so much anti-capitalism, but anti-Federal Reserve, anti-fiat currency. And I love all the comparisons because it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, that all fits if you really kind of just like squint and tilt your head.
Yeah.
Or it could just be like a kid's story. But yeah, I love how all the different things fit. And the primary thing is that in the books, Dorothy has silver slippers, not ruby.
Yeah.
Ruby was just added to the 1939 the musical version because it just looked better on film because they were doing the whole Technicolor thing back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That looks great.
But yeah, in the original books, they were silver, and so the story goes that the whole story of The Wizard of Oz is that Oz is like the president of the United States, someone that says they're all powerful but really don't have a whole lot of power. It's all just an illusion. The Emerald City is like the Federal Reserve, like fiat currency that's not backed by anything. And so the yellow brick road was originally the golden brick road, and the silver slippers were supposed to be your way of basically getting back financial independence with real currency, as opposed to the fiat promissory notes that are issued by the central bank and the government. That's what it was. The Emerald City is a central bank.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff in there that supposedly L. Frank Baum tried to put in there. Oh, and the Tinsman, the Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion were all representative of different factions of the American population. The Scarecrow represented the farm workers, the Tin Man represented the industrialists, and the Cowardly Lion was, I think, whomever was the president at the time. Taft, maybe? I can't remember. Who eventually put through because they were calling him a coward for instituting the ban on gold and the seizure of the gold from the population during the time.
Oh, okay.
So,
I don't
yeah.
remember what president that was. That's an Elizabeth question.
Yeah. But there's some cool stuff in there, and that I like diving into those kinds of conspiracies a lot more because they're just kind of fun, you know. It's like there's some interesting things in there, some parallels, you could say.
I do like how, like, right now, like, people our age are kind of sort of like, cash isn't real anyways, like, just because you have a credit card, like, who even needs cash, who needs a checkbook, it's not, it's the same thing.
I mean, they already got all your information. If you have a cell phone, if you have a Facebook, it's all already, they got you. I mean... They got you.
Money's not real, just keep it all in a card, nobody cares, who needs her cash, it's not real. I mean,
it was like...
But, like, we're like, I'm not going to carry so much money on me anymore. I've got the credit card.
There's, well, this is kind of way now getting outside the topic, but I used to work with a person when I used to work at YPG who was a Mormon. And some people who are a certain level of religious will also be kind of, I guess prepper would be the right word for it.
Okay.
You know, like ready for when
ready for revelations for the
ready for whatever it is that happens that crashes our current system. So he gave me a little pamphlet one time of like the 10 things you can do to start getting ready for when it happens. It being like, you know, in capital letters. And I remember one of them, which I thought was kind of like, hey, that could actually be practical, is to keep like 10 rolls of silver dimes, because once the economy crashes and money isn't real anymore, then like only precious metals are going to hold value. So you can have like actual currency, but that's still made of silver, and that's going to be like a good stopgap between like the...
There was even enough silver anymore in dimes for that to work, though.
I mean, it'd have to be like the older ones, like the ones that they stopped making sometime in the 70s, maybe. I forget when it was. Yeah, so the idea, I mean, you still can buy rolls of those kinds of coins.
Keep those copper pipes, though. Copper pipes, yeah.
I mean, yeah, any precious metal you can get your hand on. I mean, like, go steal some catalytic converters. Just kidding, don't do that. That's illegal. Just, any kind of metal that has actual use. Because that's the funny thing about money. Like, money is only supposed to be... We are going way off topic. Whoa.
Yes.
This, damn.
We are.
This is what happens when I drink and I podcast. I lose focus. Okay, let's go back to the movie.
Let's go back to the movie. So, now that Dorothy has Scarecrow, she figures out that anything green is what is a member of Oz. So they're like, find all the green things. And of course, the first thing they find is gum. He's turned into like a base or something. I don't know. That makes zero sense, but alright. And
it was like some kind of a J thing, yeah.
Yeah. They find Jack as well. And was that it? I can't remember who else their friends were at this moment. Oh, and Jack and Belina is still in Jack's head when he comes back. And as that's happening, the room is falling apart, and the Gnome King has turned into a massive mountain man again. All I could think of was the end of Aladdin when Jafar turns into a genie or swords or whatever he turns into, and it's like that lava room, and Jafar's all huge. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And he's basically gonna eat the things. He eats something.
No, he eats he tries to eat Gump, and he rips off the couch.
It's just a sofa.
Yeah.
It's just a sofa, so he doesn't get Gump's head, which is the moose head. And then he grabs Jack to eat him with little Belina in it. and as like he's dangling Jack from his feet, so Jack's jack-o'-lantern head is like hanging in his mouth, and Belina is like peeks out through one of his eye holes and is like, oh my god, and chickens out and lays an egg. And that egg gloriously falls.
Oh, well, we forgot to mention then, because that would have made sense if we brought it up earlier. So when we're first introduced to Belina as just a regular chicken, Dorothy's all like, you haven't laid any eggs, Belina. If you don't lay an egg, Auntie M's gonna stew you for dinner or something like that.
Yep. Yeah. Belina needs to get the egg scared out of her.
Okay.
And as she lays the eggs, he hears the chicken croaking. Or chicken, not croaking, clucking. chicken, not a frog. Belina clucks, and he's like, a chicken? And the rock people are like, a chicken! And then the egg falls down. And then you find out that apparently to gnomes, eggs are poison.
Yep, that's why they were so angry that a chicken came to Oz in the beginning.
Yes. Belina kills the Gnome King by laying an egg and fright.
A pretty gruesome death, by the way. Like, even though he's made of rock, he, like, decomposes.
Yes, very much like the ends of Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. The guy drinks from the wrong cup.
Yeah, it's like
just shrivels away.
Yeah.
And Dorothy gets her slippers, and she wishes that they all turn back to Oz. You find out in the conversation between Mombi and the Gnome King that Ozma is trapped. Mombi is holding her trapped. And you learn that Ozma is basically the rightful heir to Oz. Yay. And then they get back to the Emerald City. Dorothy uses slippers to do that. Only she then realizes that she never saved TikTok. But thankfully, TikTok turned into his little badge, his little medal, and that came on Gump's antler by some miracle. And she brings TikTok back to life, and she hugs him because TikTok is a living being to her.
Yeah.
And so all the people become not stone anymore. All the heads return to their original owners that Mombi had taken from a couple of dancer women. And they throw a huge party. And as they're throwing the party, they're like, Dorothy, you should be queen, you should be queen. And Dorothy's like, hey, I'm 10, calm down. And as that's happening, Ozma appears in the mirror behind Dorothy. And lo and behold, it is the girl that originally saved her from the insane asylum. Shock place, whatever it was. And she pulls Ozma out of the mirror world, because it's another thing mirrors can do, is they can trap you in them. Be wary of mirrors. And everybody's like, yay, Ozma can be your queen. And they're like, but Dorothy, you should stay. And Dorothy's like, nah, I'm going to return back to Kansas. And I'm literally like, why? Why are you going to return back to Kansas?
Yeah, just waiting for that electroshock. And she really wanted that to happen, apparently. Oh, but Belina was like, nah, man, I'm a hero. I'm going to stay here. Like, people are going to worship me.
Belina was like, no, I can talk. I feel like Belina was like, I can talk here. Like, why would I?
Yeah.
Like, I'm more than just a chicken here.
It's like, reality sucks, man.
Yeah, I know. I was like, Dorothy, don't go back to depression. That's why.
Well, that wasn't even Depression era yet. That was like 1899.
Was it? I don't know.
I mean, it might have been a dust bowl. I mean, it was depressing for Auntie Em and Uncle Henry because they're still recovering from the tornado that like destroyed their farmhouse. But
yeah,
everyone else looked like they were doing fine.
Just like, not so great of a time to be a woman. Just like, stay.
Well, I mean, that's just about any time in history, you know.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there are some that are better than others. Ish. I think it's getting there.
Yeah.
I don't know. But Dorothy chooses to go back. Ozma says, okay, you can go back, but we're going to keep in touch, right? And Dorothy's like, yeah, sure. Dorothy goes back. She appears by a creek. Her uncle finds her. Mad celebration. It's apparently that she has been gone for the same amount of time that she had been in Oz, for what I'm assuming. And the house has been rebuilt, and she's in her room, in her own room, and she's actually sleeping now, and Auntie M's happy, and kind of sort of apologetic for trying to shock her. And, oh, also you find out that the asylum was burned down, and the only one who didn't make it out was the doctor, so the Gnome King guy.
Yeah, I mean, happy ending, right?
Yeah, happy ending. And Ozma checks in on Dorothy through Dorothy's mirror, and Dorothy's like, hey, Auntie M, come look. because Dorothy did not learn her lesson that you should just not talk about Oz.
Yeah.
And like how Ozma was like, shut up, are you crazy? And so Ozma disappeared. Dorothy's like, oh, okay, got it. I'll keep it a secret. And that's what you got. That's it. That's the end. Return to Oz.
She just goes outside and starts playing with Toto. Which, by the way, we completely sidelined Toto because he was just there at the beginning, at the very end, and that was it.
Yeah.
Didn't really factor much into this story.
See, this is where I wanted to see like their version of the first book, because I was like, did Toto talk then? Like, if Bellini talks, would Toto have talked in the book?
I mean, based on the logic, he should have.
He should have. Yeah, all living things can talk in Oz. So,
Yeah.
I'm like, huh, that's neat. Why can't you make your first version, I guess? Yeah, this did not do great in box office because it was not a sequel to Wizard of Oz. So, I don't think anybody wanted it either. It also held the Guinness World Record for a sequel that came the farthest from the original, I think. Something like that. I'm wording that horribly wrong, but it came out a significant amount of years after Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
Held that record until another Disney sequel, which now I think currently owns it. I should see if that hasn't changed, but Bambi's sequel, which was called, what was it called? Bambi and the, what was it, Master of the Forest or King of the Forest? I can't remember, something like that. Which is a sequel that I have watched because I have watched a lot of Disney movies. And that's a sequel in which Bambi, it's basically the story of Bambi growing up with his dad after his mom died. And how
his dad was still around?
King of the Forest. Yeah, don't you remember? You don't remember Bambi? So,
I don't
like,
remember.
Bambi's mom is
Yeah, I
like
remember his mom getting
that,
shot, but...
Yeah, and she had a baby with the King of the Forest. That's why his dad was never there, because he was, you know, the head deer. He was the king.
Oh, yeah, it was called Bambi and the Great Prince of the
see him from a
Forest. Yeah.
distance. Great Prince of the Forest, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
And he was always called Prince or whatever. And then when his mom dies, his dad comes into him in the snow. It's really pretty scene. It's like snow, and his dad comes up and he's like, "Come with me, son." And Bambi goes off, and then next thing you see is Bambi is now a teenager after growing up with his dad, and Bambi is ready to, you know, become the next king. And
Gotcha.
it's actually one of the sequels that, although it was not good, I actually remember quite enjoying watching. I thought it was something that I needed of the story, was like how the king dealt with, I guess now I have to raise you, like, kind of thing. And Bambi, like, coming of age, I guess, was interesting. It's not quite as pretty as the original, but it was still worth the watch of Disney straight-to-movie sequels. Yeah, but that
Pretty
one now
sure,
holds
yeah.
the record as being the longest period between sequels. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's Dorothy. So Return to Oz. There we go. That's Return to Oz. 1985. Should this get redone? Should it stay where it is? Should anybody watch this?
You know what's funny?
What?
Because the last Wizard of Oz, well, I wouldn't even say it was the last one too, but so the last theatrical Wizard of Oz movie we got was Oz the Great and Powerful.
Yes. I remember that.
That movie was kind of a crapshoot because there were parts of it I liked, but as a whole, I really didn't like it. I don't know, maybe Sam Raimi wasn't the best director for it. I actually liked the casting of Mila Kunis as whatever her name was, Nymphadora or something like that.
The West Nymphadora, I guess, which I honestly love. Anything.
Who eventually becomes the Wicked Witch of the West. James Franco, probably not as much as Oz, but I mean, whatever. And then before that, the last time I remember seeing something Oz related was Tin Man.
The sci-fi show?
Yes.
Yeah, Tin Man. Yeah.
That was so awful.
Yeah.
I mean, like I liked all of the basic individual actors on their own, but for some reason, all of them coming together for this project, I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, I was just staring at this, like, in awe of how awful it was, because I hated it so much. But I don't know. I feel like if you're not gonna do Oz right, and honestly, I don't feel like anybody has. I think like Return to Oz has been the closest to getting the actual tone of the real books down to some degree, where it's got some of that fantastical element, but it's also dark as fuck. If you're not going to do that, then you should at least try to follow the style set in the original. Well, I can't even say original because there were Wizard of Oz movies before that one. But the one that everybody knows, with the red ruby slippers and the Technicolor and all that stuff, you know, you got to do one or the other because they're very, like, specific. And I feel like every other attempt to do something Wizard of Oz related, and man, there's been a lot of straight-to-video Wizard of Oz movies. Because it's like, I think it's in the public domain now. And it has been since the 80s. That's one of the reasons why Disney did it, apparently, was because it was no longer going to be owned by anyone. So, yeah, they did that. And there's just so much out there Wizard of Oz related where it's just a retelling of the musical version with, what was the name of the actress? Of the original?
Oh.
Or of the main one?
Gosh, Judy Garland. There you go.
Yes, Judy Garland. So many just try to copy what that one was, but that one wasn't actually Wizard of Oz. So it's an imitation of an adaptation that wasn't exactly faithful. So I feel like it's one of those that's just it feels like it's too difficult in less capable hands to do it justice. So therefore, why do it at all?
They should do the Snyder Cut.
I would watch the hell out of a 4-hour version of this movie. Fuck yes.
I regret saying that already.
I want to hear. I want to hear King Gnome say, "I will fucking kill you." Oh, that brought me right back. I'm in now. Let's do the Snyder Cut for everything. Snyder Cuts for all.
God. Okay. I regret. I just said I shouldn't have to. I regret watching that movie too.
You put it out there, so now it's materializing.
Yeah, that's the Snyder Cut. Nah, I'll take the James Gunn cut, I guess. I don't know.
You know, it'll have good music.
Yeah, it'll have good music. Guillermo del Toro.
Oh, fantastic. That would be amazing.
I think that would work.
Yeah.
He could pull it off.
You need someone like him.
Make it the right amount of dark.
He would have loved to, like, all the fucking clockwork shit with TikTok and all that stuff. He loves all that little...
Well, I'm thinking more of his, not Labyrinth, what's it called? Pan's Labyrinth?
Pan's Labyrinth, yeah.
That style.
That's a dark fucking fairy tale, yeah. That's great.
That's how it should be. There we go. That's the only way I would take these.
Done.
Let's
do it.
Anymore Wizard of Oz. But
well, I'm planning on... I do have it as in my 5-year plan. I'm winning the Powerball. So when I have enough money from that, I'm going to reach out to him and I'll produce his next movie. And hopefully we can just start a beautiful relationship.
Okay, that sounds great. Alright, throw me in on that relationship. I want to do some writing stuff.
Hey, I mean, that's definitely... He's all about that.
So that's it. Anything else to add? According to Mitch.
Like, wrap it up. No.
You're at an hour. Go away.
That was, I mean, I think we covered all the bases. This was a crazy, dark movie from my childhood that I liked watching just as much. The Wheelers were awesome. If anything redeems the movie, it's TikTok and the Wheelers, just because they're so crazy. And I've actually seen cosplay of the Wheelers. They're just as crazy as you would imagine.
That's cool. I'll have to look on Google for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can't do it for long because that's gotta be killer on your like appendages. But yeah, it looks pretty awesome. Yeah, the Wheelers look like they belong to like a 1980s like pop punk band, like Oingo Boingo would probably be like doing the music for a Wheelers themed like movie or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I this is one of those I was looking forward to. I feel like I still hold it in a high regard just because of how weird and like dark it is, and this just seems like something that didn't fit with everything else that came out around the same time. And yet also I could still name like off the top of my head like 5 or 6 other crazy dark movies like this that were meant for kids.
Yeah. They were actually really cool. They creeped me out. That's why they creeped me out. So they were supposed to be creepy. I mean, they nailed it. So if anybody wants to talk to you about the evils of capitalism and the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, money isn't real, man.
Where can they get at you?
All right, you can at me on Twitter. I am at MagicBollocks, and yeah, why don't you send me some cryptocurrency? We'll talk about the virtues of Bitcoin.
If you also happen to have read Dorothy Must Die series, let me know what you think about it and what you remember about it, because I clearly don't remember it that well either. You can tweet me as at JMBaileyWrites. Please, wherever you're listening at this to, please rate, review, and subscribe. And also, if you would like to find this podcast and the other podcasts that we are on, which would be Week's Watch, you can find that on geekelitemedia.com. You can also chat with Geek Elite Media as at Geek Elite Media on Twitter and Instagram, and we are facebook.com/Geek Elite Media. Don't forget, we also do have a Patreon at which you can get a lot of awesome exclusives and behind the scenes, and I think a few bloopers or something. You can find all that fun bonus content with just, if you got some dollars to spare on Patreon as Geek Elite Media.
And money isn't real.
Money isn't real. You might as well spend it. And with that, always remember to geek out.
This concludes our broadcast. Beep.